Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's meeting of the Development Management Review Committee. This is the first meeting we've had for quite some time. It will be held under the Council's hybrid protocols. So if I can remind members, elected members who are remote, please keep your cameras on at all times, as this is quasi-judicial, and remote attendees should mute their microphones. The proceedings will be broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel, and any decisions or Council papers can be found on the Council's website. Just for the benefit of those watching or attending in the Chamber, can I just mention that Councillor Clark will be participating only in items 6 and 7 and will simply be observing on items 4 and 5. If we can just go to apologies and substitutions, please.
Thank you, Convener. No apologies.
No, okay, we'll move on to declarations of interest and statements of transparency. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. I declare a non-financial interest in item 6, report 195/25. I'm a close friend of the owner of the land. I therefore will not take part and remove myself from the meeting during this item.
Okay, thank you. Any other declarations of interest, statements of transparency? Okay, thank you. In the light of Councillor McLaren's declaration of interest, can I ask elected members applying Standing Order 3.1 to juggle the order of papers so that we discuss item 7, Russell Street, Montrose, before item 6, Gowan Bank, where Councillor McLaren is declaring an interest. Is that agreed? Okay, thanks. That will make things run more smoothly, I think. Okay, we move on to the minute of the previous meeting, which was the last time we met, the 1st of April 2025. Is that a correct minute? Okay, happy with that. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the first case today, which is item 4, there 60 to 62 High Street, Arbroath, where obviously we did a site visit this morning. So I'll hand over to Fiona Milne to take us through the planning presentation.
Sorry, thank you, Convener. I'll share the presentation. I can figure out which one it is. Nope, it's not that one. Sorry, I've got them in 2 separate presentations with these. No, but this is the right one, Arbroath. Oh. So, here we go. So the case in front of members seeks the review of the refusal of planning application for the erection of 15 flats at 60 to 62 High Street, Arbroath. The application relates to a vacant gap site on Arbroath High Street, and it's within the conservation area. The site was previously occupied by a 2-storey office building which was demolished in 2021 as it had become dangerous. And you can see on the location plan here the site outlined and shaded in red, just indicating its position on the High Street. The Webster Memorial Theatre, which is a Category C listed building, is immediately adjacent to the north, with 2.5 and 3-storey buildings to the south, all fronting onto High Street. The theatre is a large-scale building, while the buildings to the south are more domestic in scale. Ladybridge Street car park is to the rear, with a pedestrian connection between the site and the theatre. Buildings in this part of the conservation area are generally stone-built, sitting on the heel of the footway with roof ridges running parallel to the street and including chimneys and dormer windows. The proposed block of flats would be 3 and 4-storey and would provide affordable housing. The frontage onto High Street would be 4-storey and of a similar height to the theatre, with a natural stone finish and some detailing picking out features found elsewhere on the High Street. The building steps down from 4 storeys to 3 at the rear and has a more functional appearance on its side elevations and a flat roof with solar panels. So you can see the site plan here, the Webster Theatre to the north, and then the other buildings to the south. And you can see the main elevation onto the High Street with the solar panels on the roof, and then the lower section to the rear. And then beyond that, in the rear sort of courtyard area, there's a bin store and a clothes drying area. and then beyond that the car park. And you can see the path that leads onto the high street between the proposed building and the Webster Theatre. And again, this is the elevations. So the north elevation is facing onto the Webster Theatre, so it wouldn't be particularly visible from anywhere really. And that includes the access to the majority of the flats in the building. In the top right there, you can see the front elevation. So there's 2 doors on there that do give access to those ground floor flats. And then the south elevation again is the other side towards the buildings to the south, the residential buildings to the south. And then the bottom right, the west elevation, is facing onto Ladybridge car park. So you can see the higher 4-storey portion that fronts onto the high street in the sort of background, and then how the roof steps down, and then there's the 3-storey section that's fronts onto the car park beyond. And again, this just shows the site sort of in profile. So you can see this is on high street elevation. So you can see to the right of the building is the Webster Theatre, and to the left is the existing sort of commercial ground floor, residential upper floor building. And again, you can see the path that leads back to the car park behind. So the proposed 15 flats are to comprise 8 2-bed flats and 7 1-bed flats. Access to 13 would be from the north, as I was saying, from the path between the Webster Theatre and the proposed building. The access would be down that sort of alley or path. And the communal stair with the centre of the building. Private amenity space of approximately 130 square metres with the bin store and the drying area as proposed to the rear. No car parking is included within the site. The proposal has been amended to change the detail of the front elevation, to reduce the scale of the building and reduce the number of flats from 20 to 15. I can confirm I've had no previous involvement in the application and I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party, although I was at the site visit this morning. The case officer report, notice of appeal and other information is detailed in the papers in front of members. And there's a few more. These are the plans for the building, just showing the sort of location of the flats. The bottom of the screen is the high street. So you can see in the left-hand side, that's the ground floor. You can see the sort of access off the high street into those 2 flats. And then, say, between that and the Webster Theatre, you can see the access into the central stairwell that then gives access into all the other flats in the building. And then the upper floor, again, very similar. And then once we get up a bit higher, you can see where the upper floor, there's the 3-floor section and the 4-floor section. So there's only a 4th floor or a 3rd floor over part of the building. And then again, the solar panels on the roof. And just some sections again that show the location of the stairwell and building. And then some photos that we've already just been out on a site visit, so probably don't really need to look through these, but just very quickly, have a quick, not put the fence back up since we were there. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Any questions now for officers, either for Ms Milne or other officers who may be in attendance? So, Councillor Doran.
Thank you. So, I had a couple of questions around it. So we've obviously had updated information about the noise as well. So in terms of the decisions that the council made for refusal, does that now really come down to relating to the loss of amenity and daylight, the other property, and then around the amenity space?
Yes, that's, well, my understanding is that yes, the noise issue has now been addressed. I don't know if...
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to get Mr Petrie's views on that. And if you've effectively asked the question, so we can ask him to speak in a minute. I think the other objection was the aesthetic one, that the frontage of the building wasn't appropriate for the location. Now, I guess it would be interesting to get members' views on that. But that was certainly one of the arguments that was put forward by the council in refusing it. Perhaps we ask Mr. Petrie just to clarify the noise situation and make it clear what his views are and his advice to us is.
Thank you, Convener. Can you hear me okay? Hello?
Loud and clear.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Convener. Yeah, we're happy with the noise assessment now, the updated noise assessment. They undertook an exercise whereby they tested the noise on and off in the theatre with a simulated loud noise music source. This was able to show that the noise measurements at the site are not affected, particularly by the theatre. That gives me a great deal of comfort that in the future, once these are occupied, the council won't have to take enforcement action against the theatre. So I'm happy to support this on the basis of that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. I think that showed the value of asking the applicant to do that, and that's clarified that, which was quite a major issue at the last meeting. So other questions for officers? I had one myself. If you look at the reasons for, or the refusal reasons, let me just see. Right, okay. Yeah, refusal reason 4, which is on the papers for the 1st of April. The development does not comply with policy DS4 as it would result in the loss of daylight to west-facing windows of the adjacent property to the south. I'm not quite sure, because the building to the south has no windows facing this proposed building, does it? The west-facing would have been on the car park side of that building. I'm struggling to see how they could be impacted really by this building. I don't quite understand that, but maybe you could clarify that one.
My understanding is, if I can share my screen. So this building here, because there's a bit that extends out beyond, because the proposed building extends further towards the car park at the rear,
right,
and then the building to the south of it, where it projects out at the rear, has windows that would be overshadowed, is my understanding of what the issue would be.
Yeah, I see the point. Okay, right, okay, that clarifies that. Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, Convener. It's just to go to reasons for the refusal decision number 3. It states that it does not deliver a high design standard which draws upon those aspects of the townscape that contribute positively to the character of the area. From the site visit today, we see that the buildings in that area, they're a mishmash of different styles and, sizes and, ages. Looking at the diagrams here, I think this does actually contribute positively to the character. Can maybe officers explain why it doesn't?
Do you want to try that, Ms. Mill?
Well, from the reading the officer's report handling, my understanding of the issue is to do with the depth of the building. So it's the residential buildings generally within the area are quite shallow buildings, if that's the right way of putting it. Whereas this building extends quite far back, is like a deep building, it extends quite a long way back into the plot, and that's the main issue with. So other buildings are smaller in the plot and then have a sort of rear garden area, a larger rear garden area amenity space, whereas this one takes up more of the plot, and doesn't provide the same level of amenity space. So in that way, it doesn't. I think that's the main issue.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Norton.
Yeah, I just had one question that was raised from the site visit today, which was about is there any lighting proposed on the side by the theatre? Just because that's where the entrance is, and the height of the building would seem to make that quite dark in that area, and I wasn't sure, and I hadn't really considered that until we were at the site visit today.
Certainly, when that building was up before, if you went down that path at night, it was a bit of a dark alleyway, I think would be fair to describe it. Can you give us any light on whether there's any lights?
I'm not aware of it, and I'm just having a quick look at the elevations, and I don't specifically see anything, but I'm not 100% sure if something is proposed, but that is something that could be controlled by condition if the committee are minded to approve.
It's a good point, well made. I think, yeah, we are considering sort of pedestrian safety as clearly an issue. Okay, are there no further questions? Okay, we've obviously done the site visit this morning. If I can ask members their initial views. Councillor McLaren. I'm going to ask you if you have enough information now to make a decision. Is that,
yes,
do we feel that?
Yes,
we feel that everyone feels we have enough information. Okay, on you go, Councillor McLaren.
Well, I thought the site visit was very valuable. I do have concerns about this. My thoughts are very much in favour of refusal of this site. I find that the let's get my notes here. That's what I was saying. Right. It would be very desirable to have more affordable housing in Arbroath, but this is a difficult site. And there are a number of policies that are contrary to the application, mainly lack of open ground within the site to provide adequate amenity. And I do feel that the building is too big for the site. That would be my personal views on that.
Okay, anything else?
Not at this moment.
Okay, right. Councillor Dorn, you want to give us your initial view?
Thanks. I'm really sympathetic to making more housing available, and I think it's a good site with which to do that. However, I do have concerns relating to the impact that's raised by officers relating to how far the building goes back, and because if we are then agree for this to go ahead, does that mean that other developments can then bypass that amenity? We're saying it is acceptable that we are removing potential kind of daylight to the yard and to the house to the west, because of the extension of the rear of this building, which to me I'm a little bit uncomfortable with. And I'm also, there was concern about appropriate levels of daylight to the ground floor flats as well within this property because of the location of them, which is also a concern that I do have. I would say, however, that I think the front of the property as proposed, and it was good to clarify where that challenge has come from the officer's decision about the look of the building, where that sits, because I thought the front of it, the proposal did fit in with the front of the street, but it's really to do with the extension and the height and length it goes back, which really worries me.
Are you minded to refuse, or are you sitting on the fence waiting to hear the argument?
I'm going to say I'm sitting on the fence, but leaning slightly more towards refusal, just because of what the impact of that would be if we were to accept it, to say that the daylight issue would be acceptable.
Okay, understood. Councillor Beattie, have you got want to give us your initial views?
Yeah, my initial view was similar to what Councillor Dorn said there. I think the front of the building is fine. I do have concerns about the flats on the ground floor, the lack of light that they will receive. I have a little bit of concern about the lack of amenity at the back of the building, because as we know, there's only a bit scant room for a drying area and bins that, you know, if you've got families in there, there is absolutely nowhere for any children to play. So while I would absolutely love to see housing on that site, I'm kind of erring towards refuse as well.
Okay, thanks very much. And Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much, Convener. I do think the building would look in keeping in the street. It's not out of place. It is flatted accommodation, which is much needed in our growth, and flatted accommodation usually has less amenities, as you'd say. They don't have outside patios and barbecues and stuff. But I'd be inclined to be in favour of the development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll give you my views. I'm in favour of the development. I think looking at the MPF4 policies, Policy 9 supports the use of brownfield land. I feel that policies 15 and 16 would support it. I am conscious that, I mean, one of the reasons for objection, I think reason 5 refers to the fact that the land's not allocated for housing, but of course this is I think what we call a windfall site. It's available because the building that was there before was dangerous and got knocked down. So, you know, when we allocate the land, we don't know that's going to happen. So I think this is a windfall site, I would have thought. We also have got to consider a number of what I would call material considerations. In 24, the Scottish Government declared a housing emergency, and the same year the Council declared a housing emergency. We have got a gap site in the high street of one of our largest towns. We want to make the amenity of the town centre improve that. I think a gap site does not help that. I think we also want to try and encourage local living, 20-minute neighbourhoods, etc., and housing in the centre of town close to transport infrastructure is something we want to support. And we have to consider that if Hillcrest, who were the proposed occupant, were involved, they take part in a common list with the Angus Council where people bid for houses. So the point is, if amenity, garages, parking is what's important to you, you won't bid for a house that potentially doesn't have those. But some people really want to live in the town centre, and that it would suit them. So it's no house, no flat is going to be perfect for everyone. I think this would meet the desires of some people. So I think there's a number of National Planning Framework 4 policies that support it. I think there are significant material considerations. In terms of the architectural quality of the building from the front, I think it looks perfectly okay. I think we looked at the buildings round about. It's very similar in scale to the building across the road, which to my eyes looked like an old bank building, a similar height. It's a similar height to the Webster Theatre, and obviously the issue is a similar depth to the Webster Theatre, not quite as deep, but it is quite a deep building. As always with planning, there's a lot of, you've got to balance things up. I would be minded to support it. I'm conscious that we have got 2, maybe 3 members who are sitting on the fence. Could I suggest that we maybe have a 10-minute recess to look at the reasons for if we were to approve it, and whether that might allow the members who are not quite decided to fall one side or the other? Can we agree to do that? So if we maybe just ask the audience to leave for for 10 minutes and we go offline, we could perhaps have that discussion and then we'll come back.
Can we pause the live stream, please?
Okay, welcome back to today's meeting of the DMRC. We have just been having an offline discussion about item 4, 60 to 62 High Street, Arbroath. I'm going to propose that we uphold the appeal, and I will go through the reasons for that against the decision notice which was issued and is part of the papers on the 1st of April meeting on page 65. So I'll go through them one by one. So the reasons for the decision for rejection was, number one, the development does not comply with TC2 and PV8 or MPF 4 Policy 7, as the scale of development, the utilitarian design will have a detrimental impact on the character of the conservation area, as inconsistent with the character and pattern development of the surrounding areas. I think on that we are saying that, in our view, we disagree with that statement, that the front design of the building is, I think, perfectly acceptable and is of a similar standard to many of the buildings in the surrounding area. So we don't accept that view. And in terms of the scale of the building, our view is it is consistent with the adjacent building, which is the Webster Memorial Theatre. So we would disagree with both of these points. Moving on to 2, the development does not comply with TC2 of the local plan, as it's not been demonstrated that it can provide a satisfactory residential environment in terms of noise and disturbance associated with an existing lawful use of the adjacent theatre, that the flats on the lower ground floor will benefit from appropriate levels of light to habitable rooms, or that the ground floor flats will enjoy appropriate levels of residential privacy. There's 2 issues there. The first is the noise issue, which I think has now been removed. We've done the noise survey, and Mr. Petrie from Environmental Health is satisfied that there will be no issues in noise. We still have the issue with the light and privacy for the lower rooms. I'll come back to that one. Number 3 is essentially the noise issue again. It's the agent of change principle, and again that has been removed by the survey that's been done, and the fact that Environmental Health are now satisfied that no noise will leave the theatre that would be noticeable for the surrounding properties, such as these proposed flats. Number 4, it doesn't comply with DS4, as it would result in the loss of daylight from west-facing windows on the adjacent property to the south that either do or could serve as habitable rooms. Furthermore, the development would have a significant overbearing effect on the private yard to the rear of the adjacent property up to the south. I think on that one, we would take, if we take the second one first, the effect on the yard we feel will be no worse than the effect of the Webster Theatre. On the first point, we say we would accept that is probably true. It would have potentially an impact on the houses to the south. Again, I'll come back to that in a minute. So item 5 is a kind of catch-all, which is saying it doesn't comply with the council's policies, and it mentions the fact that the land is not allocated for development. I think that point is it's a windfall site because the building was unsafe and was knocked down. So we're coming back to 2 issues: the issue of not enough light in the ground floor rooms, and the potential robbing of light to the building to the south. We've seen no figures on that, and that's just effectively a view. I think there are material considerations that would support approval. One of those is the dire shortage of housing in Scotland, in Angus, and probably in Arbroath. We need, and I think there's a great desire to have town centre housing. We have policies such as town centre first and 20-minute neighbourhoods. We also have a gap site in the high street of one of our major towns, and it's difficult to see how that gap site will be filled if it's not filled by housing. So I think these are material considerations. We also have National Planning Framework 4, which talks about use of brownfield housing sites for all sort of development. That supports it. That's policy number 9, and I think policies 15 and 16 support local living, town centre living, that sort of thing. So I think there's quite a lot of material considerations to support it. So I'm moving that we uphold the appeal. Do I have a seconder? Okay, Councillor Nicholl is seconding.
I will second it.
Okay, thanks. Anything, Councillor Nicholl?
I think this will be a benefit for the town centre. Encourage people to live there and commute between the shops and everything. And I think it will be. It's not suitable for families with, you know, and everything. But that's not what it's getting built for. A lot of single people, and I think it will be a benefit for the area.
Do we have any counter proposals? Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. My amendment would be to dismiss the review for the reasons outlined in the officer's decision notice.
Okay, thank you. And do you have a seconder?
Yeah.
Councillor Doran.
Yeah, I'll second that. Thanks.
Right, can we just go to the vote?
Thank you, Convener. The motion by yourself, Convener, seconded by Councillor Nicholl, is to uphold the appeal and grant planning permission subject to conditions yet to be determined, outlined for the reasons outlined by yourself, Convener. The amendment by Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Dornan, is to dismiss the appeal and refuse planning permission for the reasons outlined in the decision notice. Please vote motion or amendment. Convener.
Motion.
Councillor Nicholl.
Motion.
Councillor Beattie.
Motion.
Councillor Dornan.
Amendment.
Councillor McLaren.
Amendment.
The notice of review is upheld with 3 votes to 2.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask Ms Milne to outline the conditions, because that's been prepared already in case this decision should be taken, and obviously we have to be satisfied with the conditions. And I think you've maybe added one, have you?
I haven't yet, but we can add one around the lighting that we discussed.
Can you just go through the conditions so that we're clear what those are?
I will, and I will just share my screen if I can get this to work. So these are the suggested conditions. The first one is just the standard that development begins within 3 years. The second one is around the contribution, a financial contribution of £7,770 index linked shall be paid to the Planning Authority for the purpose of off-site provision of public park and amenity open space. And that's in accordance with policy DS5 and policy PV2 of the Angus Development Plan. No, it's not, because I've not started it. There we go. The third suggested condition is to say that the development of residential units is to comprise solely of affordable housing. That is to say, housing of a reasonable quality that will be affordable to people on modest incomes. They will be owned, managed and leased or otherwise provided in perpetuity as such by Angus Council or a registered social landlord or other body having similar objectives as approved in writing by the Planning Authority. So to ensure that the development is affordable housing. The fourth is that prior to the commencement of development, the following should be submitted to and approved in writing by the Planning Authority. That's a scheme of hard and soft landscaping works, which is to include the location of new trees, shrubs, hedges and grassland areas, and a schedule of plants to comprise species, plant size, proposed numbers and density. The location, design and materials of all hard landscaping works, including walls, fences and gates, cycle and bin storage, hard standing areas and facilities for clothes drying. And then a programme for the completion and subsequent maintenance of the proposed landscaping. And I think that's where potentially at this point another could be, number 5 could be inserted there to say, you know, the location of the lights and the specification of the lights, if we're looking for something about specifically about lighting.
Okay, are members satisfied with the conditions with the addition of the one on lights? Councillor Dornan?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask for clarity. Why the amount of the 7,700? How is that amount reached?
sorry, I've left this on. Actually, there are some more conditions as well. Sorry, I said I was finished. I'll just run through the rest of them and then get back to that. So there's also about an archaeological written scheme of investigation, which is a sort of standard thing about that, and then details of proposed surface water drainage solution for the site. And then there's a few additional notes about archaeological organisations, development briefs, a written scheme of investigation, post-excavation research design. So there's those as well. So if committee are happy with those, I can provide them. The way that it's generally, I'm actually not exactly this is done in Angus, but I would assume that it's done similarly everywhere, and it will be set out in the developer contribution and supplementary guidance. So my understanding would be that it would be an amount per flat, and it'll be dependent on the shortfall and the amount of open space. So the policy would specify that, for instance, that open space, like each flat should, for each flat, open space of X should be provided. And then in this case, open space of Y has been provided. So then you just do an X minus Y, and then there's a amount per square metre that would give you, that's where the 7,770 comes.
Yeah, it's very similar with the likes of schooling. There's a fixed amount and it's agreed, and then it's the number of the number of children you expect multiplied that, so that would be the contribution. I don't think we've got the authority to change that sum of money. That's developed sort of offline by a different group of people. Okay, so just to clarify, we have upheld the appeal on the planning application 23/00870/full for the reasons already stated, and with the conditions that Ms Milne has shown to us just on the screen there just now. So, okay, at that we can move on at that one and move on to item 5, which is the land at Newtile. Okay, thank you. So I'd ask Ms Milne again to present the slides for the one at Newtile, which we again visited this morning.
Thank you, Convener. So the next case is the review of a refusal for an application for planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house within garden ground. The proposed site is partially wooded, say previously garden ground to Burnbank. It measures approximately 1,500 square metres and is located in the southeast side of South Street. It's within a residential area and forms part of a large garden ground to Burnbank Cottage. It's bounded by Newtile Burn to the east, the driveway to Burnbank Cottage to the south and west, and South Street to the north. Oh, sorry, I'm not actually sharing my screen. Hold on. Apologies. Let's try again. Here we go. So this is a location plan which shows the site outlined in red, and you can see the burn running alongside it, and then the blue land is the extent of Burnbank Cottage, which sits the other side of the burn from it. This site plan shows the extent of the grey areas show the extent of potential flooding. So just shows the location of the house in relation to the sort of worst case scenario flooding. Let's see if we can. So these are the elevations. So the house is to be 1.5 stories with an integral double garage. It'll be approximately 7.15 metres high overall to the ridge, with external materials that include anthracite grey standing seam metal roof and a mix of anthracite grey standing seam metal vertical cladding, timber cladding and natural stone cladding on the walls. Some hedging and additional planting is proposed, and the existing hedge and shrub planting to the border with South Street is to be retained. The house is to be connected to the public water supply with foul drainage directed to the public sewer and surface water being dealt with by sustainable drainage. Vehicular access from South Street is already in place and was approved separately by a different application number, which we saw when we were on site. The application was amended to change the house design, the location of the house, the access points, and to correctly identify the location of trees on site. I can confirm I've had no previous involvement in the application and no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party, and that I was at the site visit this morning. The case officer report, notice of appeal and other information is detailed in the papers in front of members. So I'll just have a quick say we had a site visit, but this shows the proposed ground floor plan. You can see the garage, integral garage with the house, main house behind it. The first floor plan, so this is above with 2 bedrooms, 2 ensuite bedrooms. Again, the elevations we just had a look at. And these are some photographs that were taken of the site on a sunnier day. As I say, we've already been out on site, so I'll just go through these quite quickly. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. Again, obviously, we visited the site this morning. Questions for officers on this one? Councillor Dorn.
Just to obviously this one has had quite a substantial amount of information within it relating to SEPA assessments and flooding. So just to confirm that the risk of flooding to the property, now that that's been moved, there isn't a risk there. My understanding is there might be a risk of flooding to some of the green spaces around.
Yeah, that's correct. So yes, the house was relocated and the house itself is no longer at risk of flooding. But as you say, in a sort of worst case scenario, parts of the garden are at risk of flooding.
So just to clarify, SEPA have withdrawn their objection to the planning application?
Yes, that's correct.
And the council's roads and flood service have also done the same, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Convener.
Thanks for that. So any other questions for officers? Okay, we'll just go round the table and ask people. Have you got enough information to consider this case now? Yes. Okay, we have, yeah. Okay, round the table and maybe start with Councillor Nicholl and give us your views initially.
Thank you, Convener. It appears to be a lovely site. The material in the construction is not my personal favourite, but I would not refuse it because of that. The entrance needing a wee bit trimmed back to give better sight lines. Other than that, I would accept this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If I can move on to Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Yes, I'm in the same boat as Councillor Nicholl. I'm looking at the reasons for the decision. I think that the design, again, I agree with Councillor Nicholl on not my taste, but you know, I think the design quality and placemaking is suitable. Although it says to fail to provide a satisfactory residential environment for occupants, it's quite a big patch of ground. I think that's actually uses that space quite well. So yeah, I would be minded to accept the appeal on this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McLaren.
Thank you, Convener. I have a different view. The design of the dwelling is not in keeping with the character of the area, and it would be detrimental to the amenity of the surrounding area. I do have a concern regarding overshadowing from the trees, and part of the garden could be subject to a flood risk. That would be my view, and I think I would refuse this application.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Dorn.
Thanks. I'm sympathetic to this one. I think in terms of like I'm going to take this statement from the officer report, which said the application site is not protected for another use. It's in a predominantly residential area, and a residential development would be compatible with surrounding land uses, and so it does. Yeah, it has some alignment to that. I think. Yeah, I would be minded to accept this application.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. Yes, I would say this was one of those ones which I think the site visit was really useful because if you read the reasons for rejection, they were very much about it didn't fit in with the location. That was the gist of it, I think. And it wasn't a suitable residential, whatever it was, location. The thing that surprised me about it is the amount of shielding of the site from the rest of the street. There's a lot of trees, and in fact, I think you would be struggling to tell what was behind the trees because it's very well shielded. So the argument that it doesn't fit in with the street stripe of new tile doesn't really stand up for me. And we've also got to recognise that there's a lot of new building in new tile. As we came in from the Forfar direction, there is a developer building 20, 30 houses, which are obviously modern houses. We've got the conversion of the old railway property across the road, which looks like it's been converted into quite a nice house. And there was another house we caught on the entrance to New Tile, which again had a lot of glass in it. It was a modern piece of architecture. So I think there are clearly, New Tile is not just one universal style. I think this, if you don't like the look of it, and that's not really our business, it's well shielded behind trees. So I would agree with my colleagues. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call up the decision notice and just try and rationalise our response to the decision notice as we've done with the previous one. And the reason for rejection initially, number one, the proposal is contrary to National Planning Framework 4 policies 14 and 17 and Angus Local Plan policies TC2 and DS3. And its associated design quality and placemaking supplementary guidance, as it is not cited and designed to be in keeping with the character of the area. It would not contribute positively to the character and sense of place of the area, as it would be detrimental to the amenity of the surrounding area. I think we are disagreeing with that statement. We feel that there are modern housing there is modern housing in New Tile, and furthermore, this site is heavily shielded from the eyes of the public by a lot of trees, and I think it's clearly it's modern architecture. It's what the applicant wants. The second one is the proposal is contrary to Angus Local Development Plans TC2 and DS4, as it would fail to provide a satisfactory residential environment for occupants of the proposed dwelling, as it would not maintain or improve environmental quality of the area. I'm not altogether clear I know what that means. Clearly the applicant likes the look of the house because they've commissioned an architect to design it. Clearly, and we touched on this on the site visit, that potentially the garden might flood, although the house is now seen to be in a safe position. If the garden should flood, then that's an issue for the occupant, but clearly one they are prepared to accept. I think the house looks like a modern, well-designed house. I'm not sure that, for me, I think it is a satisfactory residential environment. It's a quiet street in a village, well shrouded by trees, and the applicant apparently likes the trees. I mean, many applications that we've seen, the applicant would be knocking down half those trees. Now, they want to retain these trees, and that is supported by an NPF 4 policy, which I think I noted it down somewhere. Yeah, I think it's 14. Or sorry, NPF 4 policy 6 supports retaining trees, so they're doing that. So I think there's an NPF 4 policy that supports them there. And the final one, number 3, is a catch-all. The proposal is contrary to Angus Local Development Plan DS1 because the proposal is not in accordance with relevant policies of the development plan. I think the arguments for refusal here are about, number one, it will look out of place in New Tile, and somehow or other the house is not going to be a satisfactory residential environment. I think we don't agree with one. We think that there is a variety of styles in New Tile, and it's well shielded with the trees. And the second one, I think we don't agree with as well. we think that it will be a satisfactory environment. It's a large plot of land. They're building a modern house on it, and they're not building it in a flood area. So if they're willing to accept the garden might get flooded, then that's I'd have thought a minor risk. So I think I would move that we approve or uphold the appeal on those grounds. Do I have a seconder? Okay, thank you. And counter view.
There's no second. Don't think you've got.
No, I don't think I'll put forward anything. There obviously is a majority vote for it.
Okay, so there's a proposer and seconder. There is no counter motion. So if I can just say then that planning application 21-01000/full is approved for the reasons that we've articulated. And I think, do you have conditions that we can have a look at? Obviously, we need to see the conditions before we can approve it, but we'd obviously like to see the conditions now. Just check we're happy with them.
Thank you, convener. I will remember and share my screen this time so that everyone can actually see what we're looking at. So, right at the end. Here we are. So, I'm actually not sure how many conditions there are. 3. So the first again is just the sort of general, it has to be begun within 3 years. The second is that no development in connection with the planning permission shall take place unless the following is submitted to and approved in writing. So that's a scheme for all hard and soft landscaping, including boundary treatments, including indication of existing trees and hedgerows within and adjacent to the site, details of those to be retained and cleared, together with the measures for their protection in the course of development. The approved landscaping and boundary treatment scheme shall be completed no later than the end of the first planting season following completion of the dwelling house. The scheme shall also include measures employed in the design of the development to ensure an enhancement to biodiversity in accordance with Nature Scot developing with nature guidance. Any plants or trees that within a period of 5 years from the commencement of the use of the site die, are removed or become seriously damaged or diseased shall be replaced in the next planting season with others of a similar size and species. And the third one, which I can't get. Then there's a part B to this, which is also to be submitted and approved in writing, are detailed plans and sections showing the existing and proposed ground levels relative to neighbouring land and properties, and a fixed ordnance datum, and thereafter development should be undertaken in accordance with these. So that's just to assure the appropriate planting is carried out and boundary enclosures installed and in the interest of visual amenity. And then the third is that the proposed air source heat pump is not approved unless specific details are submitted to and approved in writing. For the avoidance of doubt, they should include information relating to location, demonstrating that noise emissions so there's noise emission limits from them, and thereafter only that shall be installed in accordance with the details and maintained to be compliant with the above noise limits. So that's just relating to the air source heat pump, and to ensure that it doesn't create any noise amenity issues. And I think that's all of them. Oh no, there's a fourth one. Sorry. So this again is just about the trees. So to say that development shall be undertaken in accordance with the recommendations in the tree survey that was submitted in support of the application, and that no trees shall be felled other than those identified in the tree survey report. So that's just limit tree removal and make sure that the tree survey is carried out. And then there's one advisory note about flood resilient materials. And that is it.
Okay, are we happy with those conditions? Okay, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Agreed. And so just to summarise finally, we have agreed planning application 21-01000/full. We've upheld the appeal for the reasons we're given and with the conditions that we've just heard. Okay, we agree to that? Agreed. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on and welcome Councillor Clark to this one. We're moving on to do item 7 first, which is 8 Russell Street, Montrose. And if I could ask Ms Milne to show us the slides there.
Yep, thank you, Convener. I will share the presentation. Slideshow. Right. Okay.
Just for clarification, we're doing item 7, which is 8 Russell Street, Montrose first, and we'll do item 6 afterwards.
That's good. So this is, yes, the next case in front of members seeks the review for the refusal of an application for planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house at 8 Russell Street, Montrose. If I can get this to go. The application site measures approximately 140 square metres and is located adjacent to Russell Street. It comprises land enclosed by walls on 4 sides, sitting to the rear of garden ground serving property on Palmerston Street. So you can see here in the location plan, Palmerston Street, the site outlined in red, sort of in the middle, and then Palmerston Street to the right of that. And this is sort of in the rear garden of those properties. So the site is bounded by Russell Street to the north, the garden grounds of properties on Palmerston Street to the east and the south, and a lane serving the rear of the properties on Palmerston Street and Melva Gardens to the west, with residential properties beyond. Montrose Academy is located north beyond the Russell Street, on the other side of Russell Street, and you can see it in the drawing here, the big sort of H-shaped building. So this is the existing ground floor plan. It's basically a big empty space with 4 walls around it and a set of gates leading out onto Russell Street. And these are the existing elevations. So as it is the top left, the existing north elevation is looking at it from Russell Street. And you can see there's a set of gates that give access into the site, and then a wall. Then on the other side, the south elevation, that would be the garden ground for the next properties over on Palmerston Street. That's what they see from their garden. The existing west elevation is from the lane that serves the properties, and then the east elevation again is from the garden in Palmerston Street, so that's what they see. The application proposes the erection of a detached 2-storey rectangular 2-bedroom dwelling with a ridged roof. The new house would occupy a footprint of approximately 60 square metres, with 30 square metres parking for 2 vehicles and a small seating and bin storage area of approximately 20 square metres. So you can see here the proposed site plan. The proposed property is kind of grey. It would be the roof of the property. And then you can see in the sort of top left corner, there's a small sort of seating area with a bin store. And then to the right of that, where the gates are at the moment, there's a parking space for parking 2 vehicles. An air source heat pump would be located sited on the east elevation of the proposed house with the vehicular access from Russell Street, with a large gate proposed, similar to what's there at the moment. The house would be built onto the west and south boundary walls and be set back from Russell Street behind the boundary wall onto Russell Street. It would connect to the public water supply and the public drainage network for foul drainage. Surface water drainage arrangements are not provided. I can confirm that I have no previous involvement in the application and no conflict of interest in relative to the case, applicant or any interested party, and the case officer report, notice of appeal and other information is detailed in the papers in front of members. There are a few more drawings. So this is a proposed, actually this would have been a better one to show the seating area and the parking area. You can see the house, and then the right-hand side is the upper floor. These are the elevations. Obviously the north elevation from inside the wall, and then the other elevations. And then these are some photographs. So this is sort of outside Montrose Academy looking towards the site. You can see the gates and the site, and then to the right-hand side, the properties in Palmerston Street, and then to the other side of it, the lane that it backs onto. This is from within the lane, looking back up. The building you can see in the background is, I'm going to say Melrose Academy, Montrose Academy. And this is what you're actually looking at here, like the buildings and the garden ground is the garden ground, which says Russell Street, it's not, it's Palmerston Street. And then the sort of ivy covered wall on the sort of right hand side, that is the wall. The site is the other side of that. And this is looking over the wall. So this is the site as it stands at the moment. I say just a big empty space where a building has been taken down. And that is the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. I guess questions to officers, and I'll give you the first question. Some members may remember looking at this one within the last year. Is this is presumably has some differences between this application and the previous application, is that right?
This is a slightly different design. The previous application was sort of L-shaped building, and this is, yeah, it's just a slightly
Okay.
different.
It is a different different design, and a different therefore it's a new application. Other questions for officers? Councillor Dorn.
Thanks. So I think previously this one, the discussion was around the amount of amenity space. So from my understanding is this new application, it has got a slightly increased amenity space outside the property from the previous application we saw. However, it's not meeting the kind of the threshold, which for a small housing site is around 100 square metres for private amenity space. However, for a flat, it's a smaller amenity space of 25 metres squared. So it is more than the flat, but less than the housing. Is that correct? I just wanted to check in terms of the numbers that I got there.
Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah.
Okay, other questions? Am I missing some?
No,
no, I don't see any. At some point, I would ask if you've got enough information to make a decision on this one. And as the local member, I remember visiting this site the last time it was up, and I had another look at it last week when I knew it was coming up. So I feel I have enough information about this one. However, I would suggest to elected members that if you don't know the location, I think a site visit would be useful. That you'll be frightened, or you'll hear that it's in a conservation area, and that's correct. However, there are areas in the conservation area where you have a uniform architectural style, and this is, if you like, a street that's at right angles to a lot of the finer streets, if you know what I mean. And this street has got a lot of different types of buildings. It's clearly got Montrose Academy on one side, which is a early 1960s building. And there's a lot of, and as you get to the end of Russell Street, you're into almost an industrial. There's an agricultural thing. So that, I think it's worth looking at the site carefully in that context. Councillor Clark.
Well, you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I do want a site visit. I wouldn't want to determine this without a site visit.
Other members' views, Mr. Doctor.
I would definitely agree with a site visit.
Okay, I think we should do a site visit. Councillor B.
Yeah, like the others, I would appreciate a site visit for this one.
Yeah, I think it would be useful if you don't know the site. So if we can organise an unaccompanied site visit to look at 8 Russell Street, that would be grand. And we can, once we've done that, we can reconvene to consider that one. Okay, thanks very much indeed for that. And Councillor McLaren will be taking a leave as he's declared an interest on the last item. We'll just give him a couple of minutes to leave. Okay, so the avoidance of doubt, we're moving back to item 6, which is land at Gowan Bank, Arbroath Road, Forfar, and I'll ask Ms Milne to present the slides on this one.
Thank you, Convener. For the last time today, I will share my screen. Okay, so the final case in front of members seeks the review for the refusal of an application for planning permission for the erection of a dwelling house and associated works. The application relates to a triangular area of ground measuring around 1,120 square metres and is bounded to the north and west by the Rosie Road Core Path, to the east by agricultural land and to the south by residential properties and an access strip servicing those properties. The proposed dwelling is to be single-storey and located to the east of the plot, with a footprint of approximately 165 square metres and a ridge height of approximately 5 metres. Boundaries are to be a 0.6 metre high dry stone walling along the boundary with Rosie Road, and 1.8 metre high timber fencing along the access strip to the south. Foul drainage is to be by the public sewer, surface water is to be via SUDS, and the water supply via the public main. A 3.5 metre strip is to be maintained adjacent to the south boundary to allow access to neighbouring properties to the south, and you can see that here as a sort of white area within the site. Vehicular access is at the southwest corner of the plot, with parking for 3 cars provided within the plot. The proposal was amended to confirm the boundary enclosures and the provision of the turning spaces within the plot. So yeah, you can see the proposed site plan here. Up in the sort of top right corner, that is the amendment to it that just shows the parking spaces and how the cars can turn within the site. So the external materials are to be a slate effect roof tiles and off-white rendered walls. It includes an open plan living, dining, kitchen with 3 bedrooms and a bath. Here are the elevations. And then the proposed floor plan showing, so you can see the open plan living, dining area and then the bedrooms. And then this just, sections that show how it sits within the land. And then some photographs of the site. So the sort of big one at the top in the middle is from the main road looking towards the site. So you can see the sort of access road going in and then the neighbouring properties. And then the other 2 to either side are basically from the same place, but just looking. The one on the left is looking towards Forfar, and then the one on the right is looking away from Forfar. And again, this is the one on the left here is also basically just from the other side of the road, sort of walking up. So you can see on the right-hand side, on the left-hand side, you can see the neighbouring, their garage, and then the other area, the little walled area you can see beyond the hedge, further up on the right, is what you can then see in the adjacent picture. You can see the gate. That's just looking in opposite directions. So the right-hand side picture, the sort of gate you can see in the field is where the access would be to the site. And then this, shows, so this, again, you can see the access strip that would be left behind the houses to the south, the access into the site, basically where that gate is, and then the path that goes off up to the side, so that's the Rosie Road, the core path. And then just a few more, again, looking sort of the opposite direction, the houses you can see are the houses along Arbroath Road from the core path. And then similarly, again, at the bottom here, looking back towards the properties across the site. And then the one in the top right is from the access gate, looking across the site, sort of out of Forfar. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Any questions for Ms Milne or any other officers? Councillor Doran and Councillor Nicholl.
My question relates to understanding. Obviously, there's been a report from the reporter on a previous application. Just to confirm, this site as I understand it, wasn't included in that report. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, that's correct. So the previous application, the red line boundary, basically left this site, this little triangle of land was completely left out of that red line.
Okay, Councillor Nicholl.
There seems to be concerns about the Rosie Road and public concern. Is this site going to restrict access to it, or is it going to be mutual access, or what's the...
I think that the previous application that Councillor Doran was referring to, one of the reasons that the reporter, one of the reasons it was refused and one of the reasons that the reporter upheld the refusal was that the Rosie Road wasn't basically taken into account in the design of the development. So the reporter had felt that one of the important aspects of the Rosie Road as a core path was that sort of rural open aspect. And in this case, the officer's concern was that there's a 65-metre stretch where the boundary of the site is the boundary of the Rosie Road, so they're immediately adjacent, and that some of the sort of bedroom and living room windows would, and the garden, the majority of the garden ground for the site would be immediately adjacent to it, and that it wouldn't block access to it, although any cars coming up and going and accessing into the site would have to take access over part of the Rosie Road to get into it. So that was a bit of a concern that there would be an increase in traffic with people using the road, using the Rosie Road, and the traffic using that as the cars going into the site using that as their access. But also just that anyone who's using the path for dog walking or whatever, it just removes that sort of rural open aspect of the path. It's the main issue.
Okay, thank you. Other Councillor Beattie.
Yeah, just to clarify though, that whole area on either side of the Rosie Road is actually zoned for housing development, isn't it?
Yes, it's site F2 within the current local development plan, which is allocated for around about 60 houses. That was one of the officer's other concerns, was that allowing this single house to be built would then compromise the ability to then develop out the rest of the site in a sort of comprehensive development for the rest of the remainder of the site.
Councillor Clark, you're the local member here. Your question?
Yeah, I suppose all the questions that I might have asked have already been asked. But as a walker and a cyclist, lots of areas, I suppose my question really is somebody coming back onto this after off some time. You'll be fed up listening to this, but I really do want to meet and go on a site visit. So there's a few things that can be looked at here. I don't want to go into too much because I don't want to preempt anything, but I have to say, convener, I would prefer us all to be together to see things.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Clark. I think we've got questions from other members. Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, the two issues seem to be the impact of this potential house on the Rosie Road, and we have looked at we looked at the previous application for the F2 site several years ago, and I think we rejected it. The applicant appealed, and the reporter upheld our objection. And the second one is what impact this potential house would have on F2, and I don't fully understand the officer's feeling that somehow it compromises the F2 site. So I think I'd like to see that on site myself. So I would agree. I think a site visit here would be beneficial. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thanks very much indeed. So,
sorry, convener, just to confirm, is it accompanied or unaccompanied?
Unaccompanied site visit, yes, to the site, and we can arrange that at a time that's convenient. So I think it's been quite a long afternoon. Thanks very much for your participation and support, and that's the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Can we stop the live stream, please?